This is a white pine. Like oaks, pines are divided into the white pines and the red pines. Um, the white pines, with only one or two exceptions, have 5 needles. In other words, if you pull a branch off, there'll be 5 little needles wrapped in a bundle. Um, the red pines have either 2 or 3. The white pines also, if you look at the cones, um, they will not have prickles, whereas most red cone pines, if you pick them up, um, you will be very aware of the prickles. One of the red pines is Pinus pungens. Pungens means sharp, like pungent, and if you grabbed its cone like that, you would quickly release it. The white pine is inextricably tied in with American history. It made fortunes. England and most of Europe had cut down the majority of their tall trees that they could use for the mast of ships. And America began shipping the white pines to England and then to Spain, Portugal, even Africa, and fortunes were made from it. It was so valuable that the king issued a decree that all great white pines were the property of the crown. This did not go well with the settlers who, wanted to cut down, create a farm, this, that, or the other. There was a blaze which the royal surveyors would put on a pine that meant it should not be cut except for shipping back to the crown. Settlers would go ahead and cut the tree and cut off the blaze sometime, but this created an enormous amount of ill will and really fed the revolution. Apparently, to a man, the lumbermen were on the revolutionary side during the Revolutionary War. The white pine made all the great mass on the ships for many years. It was on the ship that John Paul Jones took out to combat the English, one of the first to ever fly the Stars and Stripes. It's been a wood that's been used for many other purposes because of the prevalence of the white pine. Many homes were built from it, as well as the massive ship. It was used for boxes, cartons, and the like. It was a northern tree. It probably did not get down into Maryland except maybe in Garrett County, although now it's been planted and seems to be thriving. It was so common in its habitat that pioneers used to say that a squirrel could live a squirrel's life going from one white pine to another without ever touching the land. Now most of those great colonies have been cut down, but it's still a marvelous tree. Very tall, they're 150 feet, not uncommonly in the early days. On the campus of what is now Dartmouth College, there was a tree that was 240 feet tall, which is, matches almost the redwoods, etc., from the West Coast. This is a beech. The sign indicates it's a European beech. At this stage, without leaves, it's very difficult to tell the European beech from the American beech. Most of the beeches that are planted along the streets are European beeches, probably because they are more pollution tolerant. Also, most of the cultivars, like the beautiful weeping beech we have out front, or the purple beeches or the copper beeches, are varieties of the European beech. The beech is a magnificent tree with its wonderful trunk, the beautiful light bark. Apparently, some thousands of years the beach has provided writing material for people. There are indications that maybe the first European writing Sanskrit was done on beech bark. But lovers have carved a heart and initials in it for years. There is in Kentucky, I believe, a beech with a carving in it that said D. Boone, Daniel Boone, killed Cilled bear, B-A-R, here 1780. So it has a good history in the American West. It is a little past its prime. When it blooms, they are absolutely stunning. They are throughout much of downtown Baltimore. They have a white bloom, which actually, if you smell it close up, is a little malodorous, but it doesn't carry, so it's not a problem. They have a couple real problems, though. The way the limbs come out makes them particularly susceptible to wind damage, and you have to be careful where you plant them. They have a beautiful fall color, but the spring bloom is very short compared to most of the other flowering trees. Probably about a week is as much as you're going to get. The other bad thing about them is that it's turned out they are very invasive. If you drive along the Baltimore-Washington Turnpike while they are in bloom, you will see them everywhere where they have spread and are choking out native trees. This tree is a Norway maple. There are relatively few trees that have what they call opposite branching. And you can see this little branch comes off there. This one fell off, but here opposite. The great majority of trees have what they call alternate branching, where one would come off this side, then a little lower, the one would come off the other side. In Maryland, only the buckeye, the maple, the ash, the dogwood, and the fringe tree are really trees that you would be likely to see that have opposite branching. This is a Norway maple. They were very commonly planted as street trees. Unfortunately, they are quite invasive, and basically now there's more of an effort to get rid of them than there is to plant them. This time of year, though, they're quite attractive, and you can tell them really from other maples the way their little, the flowers come out in little balls virtually. And at this point, they're attractive. We'll use this guy. This is a shadbush or serviceberry. It's one of the wood edge flowering trees in Maryland and one of the first to bloom. It has a lovely, delicate white flower. It got its name shadbush because it was supposed to bloom when the shad were running in the streams. In the north, it was called sarvisberry, supposedly because in the olden days, when people died, the ground was too frozen to bury them, so they had to wait until it thawed, and it thawed about the time the serviceberry bloomed. So that's how it got its name up north. It's a lovely tree, not terribly common, but if you drive around the woods, you will see it blooming in sort of late March, early April, sometimes as early as mid-March. this beautiful collection of trees, which my wife and I get to look out on from our window, are Japanese cherries, Prunus seriolata. They are really glorious. They have stayed in bloom now for, I don't know, a week, 10 days or more, and are still beautiful. Notwithstanding the fact the rain knocked some of the blooms off. They, like most of the Asian cherries, bloom before the leaves come out. The leaves have now started to come out. But like most trees where they bloom before the leaf comes out, they are more subject to heat or warmth than the length of the day. The majority of trees are controlled to a large part, at least within parameters, by the length of the day. And that is for a reason that the length of the day is more dependable. It means that they are less likely to come out and then be killed by a killing frost. But these tend to come out based on warmth, and that is one of the reasons why, for example, the Washington Cherry Festival is so hard to date, because it isn't particularly dependent on length of day. But they're gorgeous, gorgeous trees. And once again, I thank both the prior owners and the present for all the wonderful trees they have planted here. This is a scholar tree or pagoda tree. It was called a scholar tree because it was often planted in the gardens of Japanese scholars. They're quite lovely trees. You can see the fruit is not particularly attractive, but interesting. It's called a lament. They're like a bunch of peas sort of stuck together. But the tree has a beautiful shape, and the leaves are quite lovely. It was originally sent to this country by Thomas Hogg, who was a consul to Japan. He also sent the Cercidophyllum, which is a wonderful tree. Regrettably, I think he was also responsible for the kudzu vine, which he sent over, which people don't think about him so fondly for. One of the most interesting trees that we have here, it is an ancient primitive tree. Fossils of it has been found as far as 270 million years ago. So it's one of the earliest, most primitive trees. It has a beautiful leaf that is fan-shaped and turns a glorious yellow in the fall. They're famous for the fact that frequently all the leaves in the fall will fall in one night, as opposed to over time. So it's a fascinating tree. It's got an ancient history, and it's beautiful. And you can also, well, it has what are called spur shoots. You can see they're thick little shoots that come out, and then there will be a little branchlet with leaves. A wonderful tree. Okay. This is one of what they call the paperbark maples, with wonderful exfoliating bark that turns red and maroon here. Some will be white, some brown. They're really stunning trees, and they also have a magnificent fall color, usually a brilliant red. That is the more typical Japanese maple behind it, which is already leafed out. And in its case, you can see the little samaras, they're called, or blooms actually. These are bright red, which is Nice. Another tree with stunning bark. Both this and the maple we just looked at are relatively unusual. This is called a lacebark elm. Again, it's from Asia. You can see it has the basic sort of trunk is similar to what we know as muscle wood or ironwood, in that it has these sort of muscle-like ridges in it, but then the bark exfoliates off, leaving it a wonderful sort of color. It's also a fairly graceful shape, so it's a very, very nice tree. Unusual. We're lucky to have it and lucky to have the paper bark maple. Here we have a series of red buds, also called Judas tree, because they typically bloom sometime around Easter, and I guess there was a legend that this may have been the tree that Judas hung himself on. This is an American variety. There are a lot of cultivars now. They're a very nice tree, and in a week or two this should be quite beautiful along here. Here we have a variety of the star magnolia. They are early bloomers, which means sometimes they get hit by frost and the blooms get killed. But it's a very lovely bloom, delicate, and a very nice tree. They typically have a good shape. They do not get too large, so it can be a very, very nice tree in a lawn. This is a Colorado spruce or blue spruce. You can see the new growth comes in very blue. It makes it very popular because there are not many trees with a bluish tint to the foliage. The Latin name is Picea spruce pungens. Again, pungens meaning sharp. And if you grab these like that, you will understand why. They are a very attractive tree. They don't seem to be totally happy here in Maryland because they are from the West, but they're still a very nice tree, and I'm delighted we have some. Tree called Ruteria paniculata. It is from Asia. In the midsummer, they have beautiful, long, hanging groups of yellow flowers, which is how they got the name Golden Rain Tree. They also have fruit that look like Japanese lanterns, which makes them exotic and very attractive. They have an interesting history. They first came from China, and a monk by the name of Dankerville was in China. At that point, they basically closed to the rest of the world. So people knew very little about Chinese trees. He managed to smuggle out some of the seeds of this. They went in a caravan across Mongolia and Siberia to Moscow, and from there to Paris, and from there to the rest of the world. But it shows the devotion which some of the early tree people had. These trees that surround the outdoor dining area are yellowwoods. The yellowwood is a Native American tree, but it was never common. It was located sort of western North Carolina, some of Alabama, some of Tennessee, some of Kentucky, and not even common there. But its bark, its growth habit, its leaves, which are very delicate, and its bloom, which is sort of a hanging group of white flowers, have meant that it's become very popular and planted fairly regularly. It's, I think, a perfect tree for this situation. So 3 cheers for whoever picked it for this location. The yellowwood tree also can be the source of a very effective, vibrant yellow dye, and was used for that by the settlers fairly regularly. This is a Kusa dogwood. It and the Asian Stuartia pseudocamellia, are probably among the prime 4-season trees. It has beautiful bark, a nice habit. The leaves are attractive. The flowers are beautiful, much like the American dogwood, Cornus florida. The seed pods are red and attractive, or aggregates, I guess. And the leaves tend to turn a beautiful red in the fall. So there is no time of year where it's not an addition to the landscape. Our American dogwood has probably even a nicer shape. The blooms are beautiful, and it also is beautiful in the fall. It, however, was struck by an anthracnose, which killed a lot of them in the wild. My impression is they're doing better, which is wonderful, because it really, the American dogwood was one of our great woodland trees. It's the state tree of Virginia, and I think a number of other states, which indicate how people felt about it.